Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Tenuta. I'm one of Packback's co-founders and our Chief Product Officer. We're really happy to have you all joining this webinar session today. But before we started, we wanted to make sure that we shared that we did want to fulfill our commitment today to the webinar attendees who registered, deliver the content that everyone signed up for, but we have otherwise been working to pause other outreach in light of the tragedies that have faced our country for years and have especially come to a head recently. I did want to take a second before we jumped into the content of this webinar to share that Packback's stance is in support of Black Americans and people of color. And I know many people, our team included, are in a lot of pain right now, and I felt that we should not open this webinar without honoring that pain and sharing our support of the fight for equality. It's definitely a unique time for us to be working in education. It both has the opportunity to be a tool to help close the systematic gaps that we have in our system and a tool to potentially help to grow greater empathy and build curious learners who are able to lean into discomfort in a time like this. So with that, I did want to welcome everybody today to today's webinar. We are very excited to be discussing this research. We've seen some really exciting findings over the last year of doing this and have plans to continue this research that Dr. Ives will talk about at the end of this session. And I'm happy to answer questions as well to look at how we can take this research further. So today we're going to be discussing the work that we've done to look at the impact of online discussion platform and pedagogy on student performance at community colleges. And we specifically looked at course outcomes, student satisfaction, discussion metrics around engagement, and instructor satisfaction as well. So today we are very honored to be welcoming Dr. Kathleen Ives as today's moderator. She's hugely influential in the online learning space and a learning space much beyond online. It's really an honor to have her leading the session today. Dr. Ives was the former CEO of Online Learning Consortium, which is also known as OLC. And Dr. Ives, I want to hand off to you, and do you mind kicking us off to sharing a little bit more about your background and how you came to be a part of this research?
No, not a bit. Thanks so much, Jess. Yeah, so I've worked in technology for over 30 years. Part of my career was in corporate and most recently in academia. Currently, I'm working with the National Laboratory for Education Transformation and looking at innovative pedagogies and how we can help typically people that are underserved. I became involved with Packback a little over a year ago. I've actually used the tool in my online classes, and that's why I'm so passionate about the research and so excited to be with this distinguished panel today, who I'd like to introduce. First of all, we have Dr. Doreen Fisher-Bammer, and she is the Associate Provost of Virtual Learning at Harrisburg Area Community College. And then we have Dr. John Locke, who's the Coordinator of Technology Enhanced Learning at SUNY Plattsburgh, and Jennifer Ross, who's an Instructor in Government at Lone Star College, University Park. And I'd like to share a little bit about how this webinar is designed. I'm going to set the stage with a little bit about the research, and then we're going to intersperse comments from the panelists to kind of highlight the features and the attributes of Packback and how the research kind of highlights them as well. So let's look at the study context and the goals. So it was based on existing contextual research, and the first is that effective online community has been shown to impact online course completion. I'm sure that's not surprising to most of you who worked in online education. And the second was that the students exposed to engaged peers, so students that were active in the online classroom in the discussion, tended to perform better, not only just in the discussion, but in the course overall. And the third is that the impact of online discussion is heavily influenced by implementation and interaction models. And the fourth is that artificial intelligence has shown really promising results in influencing student engagement and discussion quality and supporting these results consistently. So here's the research the study was based on. And now we take a look at, so what is Packback? So Packback enables inquiry-driven online discussion that drives motivation. So you're probably asking, what does that mean? Packback's digital teaching assistant, if you will, which is powered by artificial intelligence, auto-moderates the platform discussion. And again, our panelists will get into that. It's very cool from an instructor perspective as well as from a student perspective. The platform also coaches students on effective writing instantly. So often those of us that are teaching have to go back in and coach the student. But Packback does it while the student is in the process of formulating their question. And Packback also amplifies the impact of instructor feedback through a couple of tools. One is smart sorting the responses. The other is recommending posts, and a lot more. Again, my panelists will get into this as we delve into some of our questions. If we take a look at the hypothesis on which the research was based, essentially it was discussion, implementation, methodology, and platform will have an impact on discussion quality measures and overall student course performance. So in the study design, the research was primarily a partnership between Packback and 10 community colleges and systems across the country. The findings that are included in this webinar are based primarily on the results from Harrisburg Area Community College, Lone Star College, and SUNY Plattsburgh, and their representatives are here with us today. Then we look at the data set. So over 100,000 discussion posts were analyzed. 5,000 students across both the treatment and the control groups were analyzed, 100 instructors, and again, 10 community colleges and systems. So when we take a look at the experimental group, what they did was use Packback's platform and pedagogy for discussion, including student-generated open-ended inquiries as discussion prompts. Now that may be a little bit different from some of you who are used to having the instructor provide the discussion prompts. So these are student-generated, not instructor-generated. Also, there's the whole notion of student choice. So students had a choice over which peer questions they were going to respond to. And finally, again, this might also break up your paradigm a bit. The discussion board was continuous. And what that means was it ran for the entire course and it never closed. Some of us will shut our discussion boards down after a week or after a module. This discussion board was open throughout the course. Now again, you compare that to the control group, where the control group typically used the school's LMS, the whole discussion protocol, and that included, in most cases, instructor-posted prompts. It would require, or the instructor would require, specific responses per assignment, and the discussions were module-based. Most courses used a second course that were taught by the same instructor using LMS discussion as the control, and some courses used historical data for the same course where the LMS discussion had been used. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to our panel, and Doreen, I'm going to ask you the very first question. And that question is, what were your institution's goals when engaging in this study and online discussion with Packback?
Yes, thank you. Going into this academic year at Harrisburg Area Community College, our virtual learning courses for the fall semester, we were increasing the class size to the same as our face-to-face course caps. So I was a bit concerned, making sure that we have interaction in our online courses, which is highly valued by our faculty and our students, and also maintaining the success scores that we have in our online classes. So Dr. Ski, our president at HACC, had shared with me about this opportunity to be part of a national community college research project using Packback and the AI technology in our classrooms. And I was very excited. Our faculty were excited to utilize this tool, and the results were such that we had higher success rates than we had in those classes that were using our traditional learning management discussion board. So that's how we got associated with this project. Thank you.
And Doreen, you said, what about the class size? How was that impacted by Packback?
So we had approximately a 9-student increase across all of our online classes. And with that, we still had the same engagement actually increased engagement not only by our students, but our faculty members. And you'll hear a little bit more about that as we go through the research here today. And subsequently, again, we had an increase in our students receiving A's in those groups that were utilizing the Packback tool.
Awesome. John, what about you? What were your institution's goals?
Well, our institution's goals are always to provide a better experience, a better, more engaging experience for students in general, and certainly for online students. And again, we were offered an opportunity to take part in this pilot program, and we too saw increases in engagement, and we're very impressed with it so far.
And were your faculty receptive to working with the students?
Some were. Our early adopters are always looking to find something new to try and see if they can improve upon what they're doing. And word of mouth spread from those folks, and now we have other folks that are asking to be involved as well.
That's great. Jennifer, what about you? What was Lone Star's goals in engaging in the study?
Lone Star College is based in the Houston area, and we serve around 90,000 students. So I think we're one of the largest community college districts. Our campus at University Park serves 13,000 students, and we're limited in space because we're in an old HP, a Hewlett-Packard building. So it's an office building, and we can't really add more on our campus. So we're always looking for ways to do things online. Also, one of our guiding principles as a system is students first, and we know that learning is starting to be done more and more digitally, especially now with what's going on in the world. And so we're trying to find ways to do that and do that well. And it's kind of hard to do sometimes. So we were working with Quality Matters to get our online courses approved through that process. And then looking for ways to engage students better. And I think that we all know that we want to have discussions online, but it's a lot different than the face-to-face platform. So when I guess our vice president of instruction was probably the one who realized that Packback was trying to do this pilot and said, yes, as an innovative campus, we're in.
Yeah, I've found often too that particularly with students that are coming back to school, if you're working with an adult population, discussion forums are a little bit foreign to them, and to coach them along is challenging. How is that for you and your instructors?
It's definitely helpful because we do have large class sizes and large course loads. So it takes a lot of attention to moderate a discussion well.
Right.
And artificial intelligence is very attractive to us, something that can come alongside and help and be ever present for the students to say, okay, here's this post, it's flagged for whatever reason, here's how you can improve it and repost. Meanwhile, the instructor is really just able to look for the posts that we like to highlight and bring out and ask deeper questions on, while the artificial intelligence is doing all the moderating that is time consuming.
Right. Excellent. Hold that thought about artificial intelligence because I want you all to talk about that in a bit. Let's go into the quantitative findings and talk a little bit about that. So the findings essentially uncovered discussion implementation methodology and platform have an impact on discussion quality measures and student course performance, as well as faculty satisfaction. All really good things to know. The first finding was improved engagement and discussion quality. And when you take a look at the Packback group performance versus the control group, what you found was, and again, the names in parentheses are the different colleges that participated. So students on Packback were nearly 2 times and often 2.5 times more likely to post. And I've even heard from some of you that they posted more than they needed to, which for me too, that happened the same thing, and that was really amazing to me. Students on Packback write more, so there was a 38% increase in posts over 150 words. Again, that's often hard to get. And they used more formatting and rich media because Packback as a tool will often offer them suggestions. It gets back to the real-time coaching. And that was an 87% increase in formatted posts. And then finally, students on Packback cited sources 5 times as often in some cases, and nearly 2 times as often in other cases. Okay, and then let's go to our next question. And I know, Doreen, your picture's up here, but I'm going to throw it to John since you just answered that last question. So, John, can you tell us a bit more about the discussion quality results you observed in your classes using Packback compared to those using the LMS?
Yeah, absolutely. The one big surprise that I walked away from the first semester that I used this was how, and I was surprised I never thought of it on my own, but the idea of having the students ask the question was
right?
Revolutionary for me.
Yeah.
Instead of, we all say, how do we get students to be more engaged? Well, if you put the responsibility of asking the question in their hands, it does something. I always go back to Bloom's taxonomy, and I can't memorize all the pieces. So when you see me look down this way, it's because I've got a cheat sheet here. But when I ask a question, it means that students have to remember what they read, basically. Maybe understand what they read, or at least fake it. But when they ask the question, they definitely have to understand what they read. They have to apply the theories that they read about and analyze that information in order to evaluate and then create a question to ask their peers. So they climb right up the ladder, right up to the top of the pyramid, just by asking the question of other people. And what surprised me so much in this process was the quality of those questions that these students would ask. They would make associations between theory and reality that, frankly, oftentimes I never made. And and it was so inspiring. And then again, as far as the quality goes, I'm I'm always torn whether I should spend time talking to them about the writing style or whatever. I figure as long as they're getting the point across, I'm more interested in what they're talking about rather than how they're saying it. That said, um, the fact that you can go in and privately coach students without having to share those comments with the whole group made it so that I could go back in and say, look, I understand what you're trying to say, but your sentence doesn't read right. You might consider redrafting it and presenting it this way. Those were valuable, and I could see the growth in students' ability to write and communicate over the course of the semester.
Yeah, because now you had the time to do that. I know in the past I never had the time. I have a question for you. Speaking of questions, how hard was it for you to flip the paradigm and have the student ask the question versus being kind of programmed to have the instructor ask the question?
The first time, they were nobody understood what I was asking for, and I had to actually put together a sample question for them. And what I yeah, and what I did was I explained to them that you don't just ask the question; you have to frame it somehow. So write a paragraph long thesis, setting up your question, and then ask it. And I put together some sort of an example. And once they had that, yeah, and now I do that right off the bat. I don't expect them to struggle. Now that I realize that it's a foreign concept to them, as it was to me, then I just prepare them for it right out of the gate.
Great. Jennifer, what about you? What kind of quality results did you observe in your classes?
It really improved the quality. So I've always done discussion forums for my online classes through the LMS that we use. And I always tell them, here's the minimum number of words for your question. Here's the minimum words for your replies to classmates. And students struggle to reach those word limits. So they're always, repeating themselves, or just, they're counting the words as they're writing it. And for Packback, the idea of trying to get them to be curious, it is a foreign concept to them. But I think for all of us who...
I'm going to stop you right there because that kind of gets into the curiosity score. Would you mind just kind of quickly talking about the whole curious leading into the curiosity score?
Sure. So as students post a question and then they have to give a little bit of a background, there's a space for them to give more details. And I require them to also post a source that students, if they wonder, well, where are you getting this information that you're asking me about, they could go and read. But in that box, they have to elaborate and explain what they mean, because sometimes a short question is not really well explained. The artificial intelligence is able to kind of dig through that and tell whether it's a good question or not. And often it's based on what kind of support and what kind of details they give. So they get coached on how to give better information to their classmates so that they've asked a better question and their classmates can see, oh, I'm actually interested in that, or I have an opinion about that, and now I want to say something and give my reply.
Right. Great. Okay. Doreen, what about you? Discussion quality. I think you're on mute.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I could have let you go on, but
Thank you for that. In our discussions, we definitely saw an increase in quality. As you saw on the previous slide, our students had about 5 times the number of resources provided. So many of our faculty that were participating in Packback were some of our English faculty. And our English faculty were just very pleased at the quality of the discussion posts, the quality of the writing. Also, as the others had shared, that our students were asking questions and reflecting on the content, that they couldn't just kind of pull information from the textbook, right? They really had to step back. We have many of our students who are dual enrolled students, also from our cyber schools in Pennsylvania. And those students, they just commented on how thoughtful their peers and their posts were. So this was a great experience, not only for our students, but also for our faculty, because they were very motivated with the types of discussions that we were seeing and the quality of posts that they were having in Packback.
So it kind of, Doreen, goes back to the whole notion when we talked in the beginning about what the research was based on, that whole notion of a community engagement. It sounded like your community was really engaging around the discussions, if I can paraphrase what I think I heard you say.
Yes, definitely. Again, the students said that because we did ask for their feedback, and some we had individual kind of focus groups with those students, and they just really spoke to that sense of community that was formed around Packback, and the level of discussions that they were having in those classes. So that really elevated their experience in our online classes. And again, as our faculty had experienced just the quality of discussion that they were having over the course of the semester as compared to those courses who were using our LMS discussion boards.
And I bring that up because I think online can be so isolating sometimes, and particularly now when you see so many schools that are shifting to online. I think now more than ever, that sense of community is so important, and I think all of you have illustrated that through your responses. So now I'd like to, we talked a little bit about students. Now let's talk about the instructor. So if you go and look at finding number 2, there was increased instructor satisfaction with discussion, and you can read some of the comments on the slide. So in the graph here, I find my students' questions and conversations more dynamic and genuine as compared to previous terms. That kind of builds on what you all were saying. If you go over to the right, my students have been using Packback this term, and I found that they're enjoying it. And since they're enjoying it, I'm enjoying it. I can kind of relate to that. Grading discussion postings has become drastically less time-consuming, which has always been a challenging process in the past, and I think many of us can relate to that as well. And then this person was using Moodle, and they essentially said that they weren't able to get students engaged with the platform, but Packback helped solve that problem for her. And so she's trying to make the Packback post now teach students things that she wants to see in their papers and their assignments. So now what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about faculty reception. And John, I know you're up there, but I'm gonna mix it up again, and I'm gonna throw it to Jennifer. So Jennifer, I know you're not the coordinator of technology enhanced learning at SUNY, but in your role as instructor in government, what has your experience been with typical faculty reception to a new tool, and how's this compared to your faculty reception to Packback?
Well, at our college, we're a pretty new campus in our system. We're a pretty old system, but our campus only came about in 2012, and we've got a lot of people who are very interested in innovation. So you don't usually see faculty pushing back on new ideas. Oftentimes you see them having their own new ideas and going forward with it. But this was brought up to us at a faculty senate meeting. Our VPI had decided to participate in the pilot program that y'all were doing, the research study, and asked for 10 volunteers. And there were a lot more hands that went up than 10. And so I was glad that I was allowed to be one who got to try this out from the fall into the spring. And for me, I think that meeting was the day before classes started. So really quickly revamping things and throwing this in there. But your online support folks were awesome and helped me to do that. And the students dove in. And
I think it seems like I'm always stopping. I don't mean to, Jennifer, but talk a little bit about the online support, because I also found that very helpful, particularly in the early weeks when I was just learning how to use Packback. And look at John. John did a big thumbs up. Doreen's nodding her head. So how did that work for you?
Well, they answer their emails and get back to me immediately if I have any questions about anything. But I also have scheduled with them whatever's convenient for my schedule to have a meeting about every month to say, how are you doing? How are your classes doing? How are your students doing? And they oftentimes bring my attention to some things that I overlooked, like, oh, did you realize your student asked this question? It was a really good one, and these were the responses. And so it's nice to have that support that they're tracking along and paying more attention sometimes than I can do.
Which is really
but yeah.
Again, I mean, from a workload perspective, and I encountered the same, and it looks like John and Doreen did as well. So, Doreen, I'll let you speak to that. How was your experience with faculty?
Yes, so our faculty were a little hesitant, about technology somehow replacing their role and their engagement with students in the learning experience. But again, then we also had that combined with faculty concerned about their increased class sizes for the fall semester and still maintaining that high level of interaction with their students. So once they again got to work with the amazing coaches at Packback, which was one thing that I didn't necessarily anticipate going into it. I was focused very much on the student experience. Again, as I mentioned, making sure we had engagement and high success scores to maintain that integrity for our online classes. But the faculty really enjoyed working with the amazing coaches at Packback, not only as part of the process, but also working with the faculty, and then also the coaching that they do with our students throughout the semester was just an amazing and, again, welcomed part of being using Packback in our classes. But our faculty were on board after they had the opportunity to work with the coaches. And again, as they were seeing over the course of the semester, the students' level of engagement, they were hooked.
That's really great to hear, and particularly because I think you had a tough crowd with the English teachers. So, because I teach writing, so I am a little bit of a stickler, and to find so much of that too was taken care of for me was just amazing, and I'm sure you were finding that too. That's awesome. John? Say you.
I can't say enough about the support. It was always there when I needed it, and yet it was never intrusive. Let's just say intrusive. I wasn't quite sure how to grade the forums in Packback when I first started with it. And I spent a lot of time with my rep, and she gave me all sorts of ideas and things that had worked for other people. And I gave it a shot and came back and said, well, I'm not really, I'm not really satisfied with this aspect of it. And we talked a little more, and eventually we worked it out so that I've got a formula that makes sense to the students. It capitalizes on the gamification aspect of the curiosity points, where I don't, and I didn't want students to think that they were just being graded on curiosity points, but I did want it to have a role, because it's a big motivation. Especially for those type A students and the overachievers, they would email me and say, I got to get my curiosity points up. Mark's doing better than me. What do I have to do? And it really did become a competition for them, and which again, I've never experienced that in a discussion forum. So having somebody at Packback that you could bounce ideas off of was really excellent, and I can't say enough about that.
Was the faculty? How did the faculty the other tools that were provided? The ones where you can move really good discussion posts up to the top and kind of highlight them. Did they find that beneficial? Did they use it? What were some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, a few of us have talked about being able to feature students' posts. And I was actually using Packback in a face-to-face class. I'm kind of doing some research on leveraging online activities in a face-to-face environment. And of course, we moved to totally remote after spring break. But what I would do is, the discussion would go through the weekend, and then our class was on Tuesday evening at 6:00. And Tuesday afternoon, I would go in and I would find the really popular posts that had a lot of replies. And sometimes I'd find a real gem that people had overlooked, and I would feature those. And we would start Tuesday night's conversation, kind of wrapping up the last module from the week before, and the discussion, and I could pull those featured posts out and carry on that discussion for a little while before segueing into the next module. So I found it in an online setting. I found that it was essential in my lesson planning.
That's great.
From 1 week to the next. Yeah,
that's really good. Valuable feedback. Let's talk now about course outcomes. We talked about students, faculty, course outcomes. So what the research showed is that students that were using Packback were more likely to have earned an A in their course than those students in the LMS discussion, and less likely to have earned a D, an F, or a W. Now, 2 of the 5 schools with data delivered in this preliminary study showed no statistically significant increase or decrease in grades. However, 3 out of the 5 did show a statistically significant increase in positive grade outcomes and reduction in negative grade outcomes. And you can see at Lone Star, which is the graph that's on the right, the example here, about 24% increase in A's than students in the same course using LMS discussion historically. So I'm going to go into another question for you panelists. And this question focuses on students. And I am going to actually throw this one to you, Doreen. So think about, when considering how students have historically performed in the course compared to the performance of the experimental group, what were your observations? So you're kind of looking at historical to experimental.
Yes. So we did have the opportunity to pull data from those same faculty who were teaching that same course the previous academic year in that same semester. And we did look at the student success grades and outcomes for those that were using Packback versus those same instructors and courses the previous academic year. And we did see significant increases in students receiving A's in the course, and also a decrease in those that were getting kind of the D's and the F's. Our faculty, they saw that students were retaining information. Again, the way that Packback is structured, as we mentioned, they need to really critically think and reflect on the information that they're learning in the course, and pose quality questions. So the faculty did feel that students demonstrated a higher understanding of the content, and again, also displaying, as we talked earlier, about higher levels on Bloom's taxonomy. So we did have that experience with those courses.
So I talked to John in the previous question a little bit about the tools. The students also have some tools at their disposal with regards to curiosity and all of that. Did students use those tools? And what do you think about student engagement with regards to that and performance?
Mm-hmm. So the curiosity points, as you heard John and Jessica talk about, Jennifer, sorry, talk about, that they were really motivated. So you saw the impact and the development of them being self-determined to get a quality score, a quality post, provide supporting evidence for the information that they're sharing. So as you know, many times these are things that instructors need to spend the time guiding students on. But students were motivated to do that due to the prompts and the guidance from the Packback tool.
Right. Jennifer, did you see the same thing when you're kind of looking at how your students have historically performed in the course?
Yes. What I got to do that was very nice for comparison was compare apples to apples, really. I had my online classes and I had my face-to-face classes in the fall, and I set it up so that one used Packback and one used a D2L discussion. That's our LMS.
Okay.
And then with the online as well. And I tried, actually, I thought it would be more beneficial for the research. I tried to make my LMS discussion as similar to Packback as I could, where I said, here, you're going to be asking the question. And I tried to frame how to ask a good question. And I had my word requirement. Here's how many minimum words you have to include. For my Packback classes, I was in my face-to-face classes initially, I set them up to have a face-to-face class where we tried Packback so that they would get the hang of it. And I said, okay, you can ask questions based on what's going on in pop culture, what's going on in the news. I teach government, so
Right.
many things are in their face. They have lots of questions. And, right now with what's going on around the country, students have questions about that. And oftentimes they're uncomfortable asking that, or they don't even know how to ask it. They wonder things and they don't know how to put that into words. So I said, come up with a question. And then if you're not sure, you want my eyes on it before you post it, I'll walk around the room. If you have your hands up, so many hands went up. And they're all wondering if they have a good question. And so many of them were great questions. They just didn't know how to put words to it. So I'd say, okay, give a little bit more details on why you wonder that. Or, find a news article that talks about that so your classmates can link to it. And initially the curiosity scores weren't very good, but they improved by the second, the third. And halfway through, they didn't need to ask. After the first class, they didn't really ask me what's a good question. They started to see good questions from their peers. Yeah. And so many times the shy student in the room had the best question. And then face to face, I could bring that up in the next class. Hey, somebody mentioned this, and a lot of you were talking about this on Packback, so let's talk about it in class. And it gave them more comfort in being able to voice those opinions and those ideas. And the same was true for the online classes. I didn't get to that face-to-face interaction, but they were straining to write enough words in their questions. And it was just a check the box. I'm done with this discussion forum on my LMS platform. But in Packback, they're like, oh, no, I think you got that wrong. I have a different opinion on that. And here's some facts to back that up. And here's an article that I read. And all of a sudden, they were actually having a discussion instead of completing an assignment.
Yeah, it's kind of like before, I think. I find a lot with instructor-led discussions, it's really just one way, and then when they respond to another student, it's like, yeah, what Bob said or whatever. But I found the Packback tool actually kind of enhance that critical debate and actually coach them through that too. John, I think you and I discussed this once before. I think I had shared with you all when we met previously that I was an online student myself, and for me, it was a very illuminating experience because I'm a borderline introvert, and I definitely in a 500-person lecture room, it takes me a while to process, so I can't ask a question right away, and so being online really helped me out. And John, I think you were sharing that you had some experiences with shy students, if I recall correctly, with regards to historical performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of that shyness was based on the fact that English was their second language. I had
Okay.
I had a class with quite a few Asian students, and for whatever reason, whether it was cultural or just because they were, not confident in their ability to communicate in English, they would just hang back. And but once I introduced these discussion forums that would go through the weekend, they jumped right in, and it wasn't long before their international perspective was so valued by the domestic students that the domestic students would start really engaging with them, which they did not do in the face-to-face setting. The Asian students sat on one side of the room, the domestic students on the other, and never the twain shall meet. But online, everybody was equalized, and the learning community doubled because of it.
That's really great, and so you really did see an increased engagement among the class participants.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
And yeah, the domestic students who were a little shy, they would
Right.
definitely. And as the instructor, I'm the one driving home saying, "Oh my God, I should have said this in class." You know. So I would jump on the forum too and say, "Hey, another thing that I should have mentioned in class today was."
That's great. Well, let's get into some concluding remarks. We've talked about a lot of things, but I guess what I kind of would like to end up with all of you is, now that you know the findings from the study and you've all been involved with Packback, what do you believe to be the transferable takeaways for instructors that are implementing online discussions in their courses? And John, I'll start with you on this one.
Okay. Well, I had an interesting conversation toward the end of the semester with one of my students. I've had him in a couple classes, and he doesn't shy. He's not shy. He doesn't shy away from giving me constructive criticism, shall we say. And toward the end of the semester, he said, "I don't understand why you're making us do these forums." He says, "Yeah, okay, I understand now that we're remote, but those are for online classes." And I said to him, I said, how many papers have you turned in this semester?" And he said, "Well, except for the midterm project and the final, none." And I said, "But you know what? I've cut and pasted all of your forum posts into one document. You wrote a 30-page paper with 12 sources this semester." And it was painless, wasn't it? And he said, "Well, I wouldn't say painless, but that is impressive." So
That's
yeah,
a little way, though. I mean, that was actually very good for you to kind of pull that information together for him.
yeah. So my takeaway is that there are other ways to assess that learning has taken place than just biweekly or every other week essay assignments and things like that. And yeah, but really the biggest transferable takeaway for me, and I think many of the faculty at SUNY at Plattsburgh that I've talked to, is the idea of having the students ask the questions instead of us.
Yes.
It really, I mean, at first you feel like you're abdicating your responsibility for some reason, but once you get over that, it really is, I think, the best way to teach. And I suppose it's probably what Socrates did a lot of the times when he was sitting out there in Athens.
Jennifer, what about you? Transferable takeaways.
That's funny that you say you feel like you're abdicating your responsibility, because I think that is a part of it, and that is one of the takeaways, though, that it feels a little bit like being lazy when there is a program that is guiding the students and highlighting things for you and freeing up a whole lot more of your time. So that was one of my takeaways, was it was working smarter, not harder, which we all know is a good thing. But it does feel a little bit like, oh, I'm not doing my job. But the results were so much better and the students did so much better. And my other takeaway is just that now that so much is going online and we have to go online, and even if it weren't for COVID-19, I think the future of education is a lot more digital. We know that you could post all the information up there online and let students just read and take tests and figure it out for themselves, but you'd lose so many students who aren't very self-motivated. So it's essential to have these discussions. And it's very, very important that our students have a place where they can say, oh, I read this, but I don't know what they mean really, even though the textbook gave some information.
Right.
How does that really apply to the real world? Or I saw this in the news and I know it has to do with our government and politics, but how, and how does that fit in? They start to become curious. And I don't think that that is something our public school system or just our culture as a nation encourages anymore, to learn for learning's sake and to ask questions about things. And the people who wonder are the most interesting people. So that's my big takeaway, is raising a group of students now who wonder about the things that are going on around them.
Yeah, I think you bring up so many good points. And as you're talking, I was reflecting, showing my age. When I grew up, the whole notion was you should be seen and not heard, particularly children. So it was kind of a cultural paradigm that you don't ask the questions, and so I think where you're seeing generations coming through now. I mean, online learning just isn't for the 18-year-old. My classes, I'm getting people that are in their 50s and 60s. It's a new way of kind of indoctrinating them, I think. So I think, great points. What about you, Doreen? Transferable takeaways.
Yes. So, going into this, again, we were looking to kind of close the gap on students with the increased class size so that our faculty, again, were not feeling overwhelmed. And that we still maintained students and the engagement in the community. But the again, the unexpected surprises were the increase in success of our students that were utilizing Packback. And also we have a commitment to faculty excellence. So as you heard, just our faculty having a more positive experience, again, leveraging technology to create a quality learning environment for our students. And that research and results is what kind of sold our foundation on supporting Packback for the next 3 years. So we're very excited for our students, excited for our faculty, that we're going to be able to leverage Packback, again, not only in our online classes, but also our face-to-face classes. And again, particularly at this time where we're offering all of our classes actually this summer, remote and online, to have this opportunity for our students. So we're grateful for that and excited.
I just want to ask you all one more question, because I think this is also important. I'll start with you, Doreen. How were the results communicated to the rest of the institution? So you said your foundation has already approved it. So how did they know about what was going on?
Mm-hmm. So our president has like ski grams, so he puts out articles and information. So we shared our research findings with the institution college-wide. And so that kind of sparked interest from other faculty members. Also, our faculty that were participating in the research study, they offered through our Center for Innovation and Design, they also offered a panel presentation to all faculty at the institution to share from their perspective, from faculty's perspective, the value of Packback into their classes. So I think it was through that, through faculty really sharing about their experience, and then also highlighting again our students and their perspective and their testimonials too, that enlisted other faculty to participate moving forward. But then again, our HACC Foundation was just very impressed with the research results and again, the success rates of our students.
Jennifer, what about you? How did your institution become aware of the tool and the research and all of that?
You know, I'm really not sure how it came to our attention, and I don't think that the rest of the system is testing it out yet. But I know that because our campus saw such success, it's more than likely that it's going to be something that our campus adopts. We all went away for spring break with the goal of coming back and having some meetings over this, and then of course we never came back. So it got pushed to a back burner, but they're still discussing this. But because we had such success, it's now on our whole system's radar, and they're considering an adoption for all 7 campuses, which would be fantastic because I think we have so many faculty, especially adjunct faculty, who are, we've already made the decision to go fully online in the fall, and some of us are maybe not as comfortable with that. And this would be a tool that would help so much for people who are wondering, how do I get my students engaged online? I'm not there to talk to them. And this would really bring them in. So I'm very hopeful that it's a system-wide adoption before our fall semester starts.
Well, particularly because I think the media has really slammed online education unfairly when people had to transition so quickly, that I do see the potential of this tool really helping faculty that are new to online really help with discussions. John, what about you? How has the message been communicated throughout your school and your institution?
Well, I can't speak for the SUNY system as a whole. I know that there have been seminars and workshops. I'm just not sure how many folks from other institute or other colleges in the system have attended. For us, we really, moving to online was a traumatic experience for a lot of our faculty. I mean, those who weren't traumatized were those who had already decided to adopt many of these tools. So we're trying to be sensitive to their bandwidth, what they're able to take on. So in fact, in a workshop today, we were talking about forums in the LMS system, and most of the people who attended the workshop had never done a forum in the LMS. And I did mention, Packback, and a few of them had said, "Yeah, I heard somebody talking about that. I might be interested." So for them, if they come to us, we're offering, but we don't want to overwhelm them at the same time. Now, after this fall semester, I think that a lot of people will be much more interested in seeing how to add to what they were able to achieve in the fall. Meanwhile, I have about 5 or 6 inquiries so far from a workshop of 30 people. And as soon as you let me know what the address is to the recording of the session, they will be invited to attend.
That's great. Well, you guys, it's been so, I know we could talk for so much longer about this. I just want to thank you for your contributions and your institution's contributions to this study. I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the continuing research that Packback's going to be doing. They're currently expanding the study to include a larger sample, and this will include several hundred courses through which they're going to be analyzing thousands of student and instructor interactions to determine the impact. And specifically, Packback is now working with Ivy Tech to understand how effective instructor pedagogy with discussions can contribute to closing the equity gap in community colleges, which is something I know we all struggle with as well. Grades and discussion, posts and control groups versus treatment groups will be segmented by ethnicity, and this is going to be used to look at how student engagement, writing, and outcomes across ethnicity, and specifically which instructor interactions with students in the discussions help to contribute most to favorable outcomes. So this has been terrific. I want to thank the audience, and Jess, I'd like to turn it back to you.
Hey everyone, thanks again so much for joining today. Thank you to all of our incredible panelists. It's been an honor to both be able to work with you and to be able to have you all join together. I said this in our prep session last week, but it's really exciting for me to also be able to bring the three of you together and bring you together to meet Kathleen, because you all are doing such amazing work at your individual institutions. So it's an honor. Thanks everyone for joining today. There were a lot of great questions in the chat, and just based on time, we'll be sending follow-up with a summary of the research that we talked about today with a bit more detail. And just for some context, in the coming weeks, we'll have a fuller and more extended summary of the research that goes more into depth about all of the different questions that were asked. We highlighted just a few survey questions in this study here, in this summary. But when we follow up in a few weeks with a longer white paper, we'll go into more detail there. If you have any questions in the meantime, please email our team at curious@packback.co. We'll be happy to answer questions about the research or about any information that you'd like to know about the product as well. And I think just everything we talked about today, there were some great questions in the chat about how do you separate the impact of pedagogy from the impact of platform. And really, well, I mean, we are a tech company, we've built a platform, but what we're really trying to do is make a tool that makes it possible to scale the pedagogy that we've seen work anecdotally and we're seeing work in our research studies that is focused around building communities of inquiry, that's focused around supporting student autonomy, that's focused on helping them ask their own questions. And I love this quote here. Instead of asking people how can I motivate people, we should be asking how can we create the conditions in which people motivate themselves. So thank you for everyone that asked that question, and we will continue to be asking that question ourselves as well. So thank you all today. We'll be sending out an email with a recording of this webinar if you'd like to share it. And again, information and resources and follow-up to the questions that were in the chat. Thank you all so much again to our panel. Thank you, Kathleen, for your amazing job moderating. We really appreciate all of your time.